All right, real quick before we get started here, just sort of bear with me a little bit as I have to read this next part verbatim. I, the owner of Regular Guy Training LLC, am no longer allowing the Sig Sauer P320 nor any of its variants in any of my classes going forward. Regardless of what PR teams say, the numerous reports of out-of-battery detonations and discharges without command over the last decade have me sufficiently concerned enough to not allow them in a loaded condition anywhere near my students during class. So let's be clear. If you bring it, I'm not allowing you to load it. The handgun will spend all of its time with its action locked to the rear, in plain view, and nowhere near an ammunition source. If I'm fought on this in any way, I am sending you home without refund, as this is a policy that I will be placing in plain view at the beginning of every single course description on my website as well. So I recognize that as we go through this video, there's people or bots that are going to go ahead and throw together these enormous comments that I'm not going to read about how, oh, you're just a Sig hater. Oh, you're just a Glock shill. Yes, I am. And before anyone says that I'm on Glock's payroll, I wish I was. Because what am I going to do? Shill for a gun company that actually makes guns that work? Oh, the shame. So the reason why I put that up front and then made the rest of this video is honestly really simple. These guys can play the semantics game and say things like allegedly a whole bunch with regards to their manufacturing and safety practices, but I'm not. As many of you know, I train a lot, I teach a lot, I see a lot of bullets get fired, I see a lot of guns come through, and over the course of my little YouTube career here, I've made a lot of fun of Sig Sauer in general, but especially after more recent events, I sort of have to articulate why it is that I feel the way that I do. Now, obviously, everything I'm about to say is my personal opinion, and technically everything that I've ever seen, as far as just my personal use or what I've seen through the student body, is all anecdotal. It just happens to be a lot of anecdotal. But there again, if you've ever asked a question, why is Sig basically really bad at everything? The answer really is that the former CEO of Kimber is like an expert at failing forward, whom just happens to be the CEO of Sig Sauer. And if you've never asked this question, either you just didn't know it, or you sort of lived under a rock here. So today we're going to talk about the 320 and how real bad it is. For those of you, though, that are about to ask about the Spear for some reason, I'm not really going to talk about it, because when you list things like 80,000 PSI, $5,000 a unit, $13 a round, less ammo to carry in general against adversary nations or possible adversary nations that will outnumber us unit to unit every time, dependency on easy to detect lasers for ranging or really shooting for the most part, because that's what people are doing, a giant stockpile of dead batteries because of said easy detect lasers, and numerous, and I mean numerous, parts breakages because 80,000 PSI, it's rather obvious that through common sense via peacetime or the logistics of, the need to win a war, that the Spear has a really, really short life. It's not going to carry on, especially in the caliber that it's using, and it will be noticed by somebody that actually knows what they're doing, as if many people haven't been complaining about this for some time, that the juice just isn't worth the squeeze, especially seeing as that whole $5,000 price tag is probably not going to win a lot of favors. Tangent aside here, I'm going to explain exactly why the 320 is real bad, even if it was safe, why exactly it is that I don't trust the Sig 320, nor the company that makes it, and we'll just sort of wrap it up at the end with essentially why it is that I'm not going to allow this nonsense anywhere near my student body. But in order to properly articulate myself, I'm going to start with the least concerning issues and on the most concerning issues, but I kind of can't get that started without talking about the P250. So the 250 is what the 320 is essentially based on. This is a double action only handgun that was so lousy at basically everything that every agency that this thing was ever peddled to failed miserably. To the point where even the ATF of all folks rejected it for reliability issues. And of course Sig's response to this was, well, your emphasis on reliability is too much. Why aren't you looking at the other things that are neat? It feels great in the hand, and this isn't just limited to agencies in America. Foreign governments hated this thing too. But you see, the former CEO of Kimber would look at this really nice looking handgun and decide, you know what, this is my chance to prove that I can ruin anything. So of course this would serve as the base DNA for the most unpredictable handguns since the Japanese Nambu. So what is the P320 really? Well, the 320 is what you get when you're completely incapable of an original thought. These people decided that they have never made a handgun as reliable as a Glock, regardless to what their marketing team says or what some YouTuber that never shoots his gun would say. Nor could they ever actually hope to. So instead, they would do their very best to try and reverse engineer one while calling it not that. They would do this by making their fire control unit removable via a chassis system, and then serialize it so that they can call it modular, forgetting that you could take a Glock apart with a ballpoint pen and modify anything inside of it. They would make absolutely certain that it uses a fully charged striker so that the trigger would be better than a Glock's, refuse to make a trigger safety of any sort, like the dingus present in a Glock, or like the trigger safety present in an M&P, for ease of blaming customers for failures in their engineering. Does this sound familiar yet? Sit the slide nice and high so that the stock models have the worst handling characteristics possible, so that they could sell you as much random junk as possible, call all these things improvements, regardless to whether or not they actually were, and push it aggressively, without properly testing anything in it, which I'm willing to bet that they did at the very least look at it, but the people that likely raised their hands and said, hey, this is not great, were likely just sort of whisked out the back door, because to admit that they would have to make their handgun more Glock-like, you see, is just heresy, I suppose. But hey, there have been worse ideas on paper. What's the worst that could happen? Today's video is sponsored by the Sonoran Desert Institute. Have you ever thought about making a living in the firearms industry? If you enjoy gun repair, ballistics, learning about firearms, the Sonoran Desert Institute might just be a good fit for you. To find out more about SDI, visit sdi.edu. Use the link in the description down below, or call 480-999-4767 today. And now back to the video. First thing, to the guys that are getting ready to type up this big long thing that I'm not going to read that talks about how great their 320 is, A, I don't care, and 2, inconsistent and apathetic QC will inevitably lead to guns that are just fine, but it will also lead inevitably to guns that really are not just fine. The problem is with Sig Sauer and their use of the English language, particularly when they're talking about safety practices or whole countries of origin. For instance, they like to say ad nauseum that everything that they make on the 320 is 100% American, when they're just not. The vast majority of the parts that go into the 320 are made in places like India and Indonesia, and then assembled in New Hampshire. This is how they get to claim that it's 100% American made somehow, when in reality it's merely 100% assembled in America. Now, I do not have an issue with overseas manufacturing. I do, however, see the use of the English language as a clue when you try to say these things, and then when I can clearly read what's on your parts packages. Worse, what seems to be made here seems to be made out of inferior materials, and seem to be assembled by people that are either A, untrained, or 2, don't care, or C, likely both. The reason for this statement is simply because the class structure that I put my students through averages a 3-day set, and in that 3-day set, I tell them to bring 2,100 rounds. Within that 3-day set, it's very likely that they are going to go through just barely north of 2,000 rounds. And frankly, we see a lot of issues through the 320 that you straight up just shouldn't see if you're trying to skinwalk as a Glock but better. These issues include uncommonly high numbers of stovepipes for some reason, regardless of ammunition used, uncommonly high failures to feed, extractors inexplicably breaking in half, ejectors also breaking because for some reason you made the handgun rather easy to over-insert magazines into. And as a note, by the way, if you break said ejector, it's part of the fire control unit, so just good luck on the rest of that, I suppose. And, like, look, okay, the Glock MOS plate is nothing to really write home about. It's never been all that good. Plenty of them have warped, and if you over-tighten those screws even a little bit, you're probably gonna have a bad time. But how is it possible that even after seeing that, Sig Sauer somehow manages to make an optics mounting plate that's even worse? The number of times I have seen an RMR or a Sig-made optic or whatever just hockey puck off of slides is genuinely concerning, because at bare minimum, if I saw a guy show up with a 320 variant of some sort with an optic mounted to it that was made by Sig, I more or less could guarantee that at some point that guy at some point or another was going to have some sort of issue with that optic, and it would likely be a repetitive issue. And of course, why can't we just round this all out with magazine endurance problems too? Because of course, the very second that we start asking these magazines to actually perform over an extended period and over the course of a couple of days, you know, just like a Glock would without any issues ever, we're just suddenly gonna not at random points. I'd also like to point out too that every magazine that they make for the 320 is more expensive than any magazine made by Glock, or anyone else that makes Glock magazines for that matter. And of course, this doesn't even get us started on the M17 and M18, of which, and unlike the 1911 or the M9, it never really experienced any real trial type testing. And here's what I mean by this. The 1911 and the M9 both had to go through an extensive trial and pass all of the required testing for those pistols. What this allowed our military to do is thoroughly understand the limits of both handguns, even if they liked them. And the issue with just awarding a contract without properly testing it is that when a company, like for instance Glock, demands that there be some sort of test, it makes it rather easy to abort the test and award the contract anyway when your precious handgun starts to run into massive issues. Like for instance, the very instant that the M17 and M18 were exposed to any real trial-based testing, regardless to whether or not the MHS was going to be a show trial for those handguns or not. So with this complete lack of understanding as far as what this platform is actually capable of, we also got to enhance the awful experience of this handgun, because remember those handling characteristics for the base models that I was talking about before? Turns out military 124 ball is a little hot. I have not met a single troop that has shot the M9 and the M17 that actually prefers the M17. Because frankly, the thing handles like garbage. And as far as the problems that the military is experiencing, yeah, they're experiencing the exact same issues that we are on the civilian side as well. To include all the safety problems, which among all the previous things that I've already said, we also continue to have things like out of battery detonations, or rounds being fired without command, regardless to whether or not it was just sitting in a holster or on a desk, with the additionally nonsensical things added to it, like people losing their entire rear sight plus plate because it's all one combo, because the Loctite that is shipped with these handguns to hold that screw into place is nowhere near the adequate amount required to keep your whole friggin' rear sight in place. And all of this, as previously stated, is before we run into the safety issues. So what's the deal with the safety components? Why are there such big issues revolving around it? What is the actual mechanical reason for all of the stuff that we discussed? What this really begins with, frankly, is the following three things. 1, sear engagement. 2, that same sear engagement with the striker foot, and 3, the striker safety. All 3 of these are really supposed to work together, especially with a fully charged striker, to make sure that nothing falls forward at uncommanded points, to make sure that the handgun itself remains drop safe, all of that. And the problem mostly lies in the fact that all of these components are made out of really, really inferior metals, assembled like garbage and not physically looked at, because as previously stated, all 3 of these things sort of come together in this perfect storm of incompetence. And some of you may actually remember that this used to be dependably worse, in that when the 320 first came out, if you hit the back of the slide at just the right angle with a hammer, you could just send the striker forward. And of course, immediately after that, instead of a massive recall, Sig decided that they were going to create a voluntary upgrade program, because why care about whether or not these people send these guns to you or fix the problem? And of course, it's been a full decade, and the only thing that's changed really is now it's unpredictable. And a lot of this is self-evident in something as simple as the striker safety itself. Now, this is the physical object that is supposed to prevent the striker from running forward if any of its drop safe mechanisms were to fail. Now, other striker fired guns have this sort of internal safety in place as well. The only difference is that other folks saw what Glock did, saw that as incredibly effective, and chose to make their pistols safe. The 320, in whatever variety you decided to pick yours up in, is straight up inferior. The metal itself is soft, it's easy to shear, and a lot of times when people take their guns apart, this individual striker safety is straight up missing because it was deleted a long time ago by simply trying to use the handgun. And frankly, the only way to actually fix this engineering disaster is to make their handgun more like a Glock, because it's the only proven method to keep this entirely safe, whether or not you're running a fully charged or partially charged striker. But of course, Sig Sauer can't do that. Their pride is too great, you see, and they're just as arrogant as old Kimber used to be, for some reason. And if you put all these things together, this is exactly how you get the fiasco that they're dealing with right now. So I recognize that I'm not the only instructor to ban the use of the 320 in my classes. And the thing is, I really hope that I'm not the last one either, because a close examination of Sig Sauer's practices should at the very least lead one to believe that their manufacturing, their parts sourcing, their quality control, and frankly their supreme and completely unearned arrogance is a sufficient combination of insufferable smarm paired up with massive incompetence that should just lead anyone that cares about their student base to straight up conclude that this is not a good idea. It's not a good idea for your insurance, it's not a good for the property you're on's insurance, and it's not good for your student base either, because that's the whole point, right, is to teach them stuff, transfer the knowledge, so that they can better keep themselves safe. So with all these things looked at, there's no way I couldn't make a different decision. So, if you want to come out and train with us, you can absolutely do that. Our open enrollment schedule is on the website. We have classes stretching out to December. If you want to set up a private class with us, you can absolutely do that as well. It is really easy to contact me. All you have to do is visit my website, and you'll be able to find the contact information there. If you want to support us through Patreon, you can absolutely do that as well. And if you want something out of it, $41 a month gets you as much open enrollment training as you'd like, provided that it is not a logistically challenging course, like for instance a private course or a soft skin vehicle class, for rather obvious reasons. And if you want to check us out through our other social media outlets, links for all of this are in the description below, to include the Discord that I put up not too far back. Also, if you stuck with us to the end, A, I really do appreciate it, and 2, if and only if you enjoyed what you just saw, go ahead and hit the like and the subscribe button, then hit the little bell notification, because that's the real subscribe button anyway. And remember guys, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.